I'm very shy. They friends say they want the puppy dog at a party, and I just think of all the guests.
And welcome to Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo with Miss Joan Marie Musi, and we're joined yet again by our good friend, Shannon Taylor from the show The Conversation, and also our guest, fascinating story, John Markham. He's an appraiser, a personal appraiser, and he does incredible work helping folks sell estates after loved ones pass away, and they have to have all this stuff and they don't know what to do with it. He's the guy you call to help you deal with that problem. And we're going to turn it from a problem to more of a celebration, of the person's life. It's an amazing story, and I'm glad you're here to join us and learn about this interesting job that Mr. Markham does.
Well, I'd like to ask John, how did you get into this? Did you study history in school, or did you study the decorative arts, or?
Well, I have studied the decorative arts, and I, of course, studied history in school, but I was actually an English major.
Oh.
And, but I have been an antique collector since I was about 12 years old. I had an older woman whom I was fascinated with who collected antiques, and in order to be able to get her to pay attention to me, I began to learn about the antiques that she was collecting, and this was an entree, and that's how it began. But I was genuinely fond of them, and I began to collect, and I come from a family of collectors and artists, and many other things too. Not so,
not to be mentioned.
Not to be mentioned, exactly. But I had never any intention of being in this business, and at a point in my life I decided I would go off to sea, and I got seaman's papers, and I went to work my way around the world. And when I came back to the States, I had a friend who had gotten involved in the antique business, and he was waiting for me to get back because he felt I knew more about the things. He knew how to make money, and I knew more about possibly how to recognize things. Well, of course, I may have known a few things more than he knew, but there was so much that I didn't know. And then luckily, through some neighbors and friends, I met a master appraiser who was doing an appraisal on the contents of their house for insurance purposes. And he and his wife, who used to accompany him on the appraisals, and I became very fast friends, and I was invited to take courses that he gave at the New York School of Interior Design on antiques and collectibles. And I was often invited to go back to their apartment for dinner, and very often the slides that he used in his lectures were objects that were in his own collection.
Oh,
so I was able to actually handle, and this is very important, I was actually able to handle the objects that he had been talking about in many instances. And we hit it off, and I would occasionally work with him when he was doing appraisal work. And that's how I got into the appraisal end of the business.
So you sort of had a mentor.
Oh, he was a wonderful mentor. There were times that I was ready to spit. He was so martinet. Everything had to be done in a very rigid fashion. And I'm not the most rigid person in the world, as you may have guessed. And I thank God every day when I'm doing an appraisal that I had the training that he gave me, because I do not leave a house and suddenly remember that I didn't do something in it, because there's a certain format I follow, which was his format. And even to the phraseology, he was a master. He really was terrific, and I'm so lucky to have had him in my life. And his wife is still a very close friend of mine. In fact, she's one of my very best friends.
Are appraisers
He's deceased.
certified by any board, or is there any, do you get a license or any sort of
There
board?
isn't, I believe in New York City you have to be licensed. Auctioneers have to be licensed, and that. But there is the Appraisal Association of America, and they are running courses and doing certification and things of that nature.
What do you look for? What should people look for? Is there anything that can signal that you have something that's not just you know, a comfortable chair, but like something that might be you know, something very valuable? Is there anything to look for? Is there anything that the average person can do to scan their stuff and see that this might be worth something and this might not be?
There's not really very much that the average person can do if they don't have any knowledge of design or any knowledge of where an object might have originated. There's a great deal that I can do on a walkthrough because there are a lot of copies of pieces that were inspired by antiques, but in the copying of them they would put other elements in for sale in the furniture stores in the mass production of the furniture. And I can glance at a piece that to someone might look like a Queen Anne chair and realize that it's not going to be a Queen Anne chair because there's some element in the treatment of it. But then there are things that are so well done that they require complete examination.
To really authenticate
exactly.
it. Yeah. Now, what about the fascination with shows like Antiques Roadshow? Do you find that interesting to, during your career, see that turn into a popular...
I do find the Antique Roadshow quite interesting, and I have the added advantage of the fact that I've had dealings and sometimes friendships with some of the people who are doing the appraising on that show.
Oh, okay.
So it's always fun to see your friends on television. And then I find that I very seldom will watch one of the shows without learning quite a bit. And at least something, and very often a lot more than I would have imagined. Because there are so many fields of collectability, and they cover the gamut of them.
They really do on that show.
The thing to remember that it is a show that takes quite a few hours to put together. The appraiser is not just seeing the object that you're viewing at that moment. He's not coming out with that long history. And now they're very open about it because they'll say, we showed it around to the other appraisers because we weren't quite sure how to put a value on this and so on. But it's fascinating to me to see the show, and especially now that it's done in a more relaxed fashion. When it was first on, I thought that they were acting in a very dilettante fashion, and I didn't find it very pleasing. But there was a show that was